911, what's your emergency? There's a child in the gorilla enclosure. Please hurry! Screams echoed through the Cincinnati Zoo as panicked visitors crowded the railing. Below, a 3-year-old boy sat crying in a shallow moat, soaked and terrified. And towering over him was Harambe, a 450-pound silverback gorilla known as a gentle giant. In just 6 minutes, the world would watch in shock as this beloved animal was shot dead. Was Harambe trying to protect the child, or was he seconds away from tragedy? This is the heartbreaking story of Harambe's final moments. It was May 28, 2016, a warm, sunny Memorial Day weekend at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. Families filled the walkways, children laughed, and the air was filled with the distant calls of exotic animals. For many, it was just another perfect day. Among the visitors was a young mother with her energetic 3-year-old son. They had been at the zoo less than half an hour, moving from exhibit to exhibit, the boy brimming with excitement. Witnesses later recalled how his eyes lit up when they reached Gorilla World, one of the zoo's most popular attractions. The enclosure was designed to look natural, a lush sanctuary of trees, rocks, and a shallow moat. Inside, several gorillas roamed, but all eyes were on one, Harambe. At 17 years old, Harambe was a magnificent silverback. He was huge, powerful, yet surprisingly calm, often sitting near the water's edge, watching visitors with a quiet curiosity. Parents pointed him out to their children, marveling at his size. Some whispered to each other, "Look how gentle he seems." That morning, Harambe was behaving like he always did. Calm, observant, moving slowly through his enclosure. For zookeepers, it was a routine day. No one could have imagined the tragedy that was about to unfold. The boy stood near the viewing area, staring at Harambe in awe. Witnesses later said they heard him tell his mother, "I want to go in." His mother smiled, distracted by her other children, reminding him to stay close. But in a matter of seconds, a moment every parent fears, the boy slipped away. He crawled under the 3-foot railing, pushed through thick bushes, and vanished from sight. Gasps erupted as people saw him appear at the edge of the enclosure. Then he fell. The child plummeted 15 feet into the moat below, landing with a splash. The crowd screamed, parents pulled their children away from the railing, and the boy's mother cried out, "Mommy's right here! Don't be scared!" Down below, the boy sat stunned and crying. And in the shadows of the enclosure, Harambe turned and began moving toward him. What started as a perfect family outing was seconds away from becoming one of the most controversial animal incidents in history. Long before that tragic day, Harambe's story had already been marked by resilience and quiet strength. Born on May 27, 1999, at the Gladys Porter Zoo in Brownsville, Texas, Harambe was a western lowland gorilla, a critically endangered species. From the start, keepers described him as unusually curious and calm, often watching humans intently, as if studying them. But Harambe's early years were shadowed by tragedy. In 2002, a chlorine gas leak filled his enclosure, killing several gorillas in the troop. Harambe survived. Keepers said he never showed fear, even as others panicked, earning him the reputation of a fighter among zoo staff. Jerry Stones, one of Harambe's earliest caretakers, grew deeply attached to him. Stones often described Harambe as like one of my own kids, and called him a gentle giant who loved playing with his trainers. By his teenage years, Harambe had grown into a massive silverback, standing over 6 feet tall and weighing nearly 450 pounds. Despite his size, he remained playful and patient, especially with younger gorillas. Keepers often noted how he would let them climb over him or pull at his fur while he sat calmly, watching over them like a protective older brother. In 2014, Harambe was transferred to the Cincinnati Zoo as part of a breeding program to help save his species from extinction. Western lowland gorillas were disappearing rapidly in the wild due to poaching and habitat loss, and Harambe was seen as a vital part of the future of his kind. At Cincinnati, Harambe became a favorite among visitors. Families loved watching him sit near the glass or wade through the water, sometimes making eye contact with children who pressed their faces against the barrier. He was a star attraction, not because he was fierce, but because he seemed gentle and intelligent. Yet behind that calm exterior, Harambe was entering a new stage of life. At 17 years old, he was reaching full silverback maturity. Zookeepers noted subtle changes, chest-beating displays, pulling at branches, and asserting dominance over the two female gorillas he shared the enclosure with. These were normal behaviors, but they reminded everyone of one truth. Harambe was still a wild animal, with instincts that could never be fully controlled. That quiet, curious gorilla, beloved by keepers and visitors alike, would soon become the center of a tragedy that would change how the world saw animals in captivity forever. By 2016, Harambe was no longer just the playful young gorilla that visitors had grown to adore. At 17 years old, he was entering a critical stage of life, full silverback maturity. For gorillas, this transformation is more than physical. A silverback is the leader, protector, and dominant figure of the troop. His role is to guard the females, defend territory, and assert authority when necessary. Harambe's body reflected this change. His shoulders broadened, his chest widened, and a thick band of silver hair stretched across his back, a sign of dominance and adulthood. His personality, too, began to shift in subtle but important ways. Keepers noticed he was becoming more territorial. While Harambe had never been aggressive toward humans, he had begun displaying natural dominance behaviors toward the two female gorillas in his enclosure. He would beat his chest, drag heavy branches, and occasionally charge short distances, not to harm, but to remind others of his authority. These changes were expected, even celebrated by zoo staff. A healthy silverback asserting himself meant he was maturing normally. But to those who understood gorilla behavior, it was also a reminder that Harambe's calm personality could change in an instant if he felt threatened. Animal behaviorists often warn that even the gentlest silverback is still a wild animal, capable of incredible strength and unpredictable instincts. A single swipe of Harambe's arm could kill a human, even unintentionally. Zookeepers respected Harambe deeply, but they were always cautious. His sheer size and power meant that every interaction required careful planning and trust. Despite these natural instincts, Harambe was still considered a good-natured gorilla. Visitors saw him lounging near the moat, splashing water, and occasionally sitting by the glass, watching children curiously as they pointed and giggled. But that growing dominance instinct, that natural drive to protect his territory and troop, would become a crucial factor on the day the boy fell into his enclosure. When faced with a screaming crowd and a frightened child sitting in his habitat, Harambe's instincts as a silverback would take over. To him, he may have been protecting the boy, but to panicked humans watching from above, every move looked like a potential tragedy. And in those tense 6 minutes, that difference in understanding would cost Harambe his life. The Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden is one of the oldest zoos in the United States, founded in 1875. For decades, it has been celebrated for its conservation programs and beloved family-friendly attractions. But on May 28, 2016, all eyes were on one exhibit: Gorilla World. First opened in 1978, Gorilla World was designed to feel natural, a sanctuary rather than a cage. Large open spaces, towering rocks, trees, and a shallow moat gave the gorillas freedom to roam while keeping visitors safely separated. By the mid-1990s, the zoo had removed traditional bars and fences, adopting the then-modern philosophy of naturalistic enclosures. The barrier system was considered foolproof. A 3-foot-high steel rail, thick bushes, and a 15-foot vertical drop into the moat had kept visitors and animals apart for nearly 4 decades. Families leaned casually against the rail every day, confident in its safety. But behind the scenes, some experts had begun raising concerns. Animal behavior specialists warned that older zoo enclosures were often human curiosity-proof, but not child-proof. While adults would never climb into such habitats, children, small, quick, and curious, could slip through in seconds if not watched closely. On that sunny Memorial Day weekend, hundreds of visitors packed around the exhibit. Gorilla World was one of the zoo's biggest draws, home to 3 gorillas, 2 females, and the star attraction, Harambe. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders, pointing and laughing as Harambe sat near the water, his massive frame making him both intimidating and mesmerizing. For zookeepers, this was a normal day. The animals were calm, the visitors happy, and the enclosure had functioned exactly as intended for decades. But that afternoon, the foolproof barrier would fail. Not because it was broken, but because it wasn't built for what would happen next. A small, determined toddler would crawl under the railing, push through the bushes, and fall into the moat below. In less than a minute, Gorilla World would transform from a peaceful exhibit into the center of a life-or-death emergency, and the safety features that had worked for 40 years would be questioned around the world. The story of Harambe is not just about a gorilla. It's about a family whose ordinary day turned into a nightmare in seconds. The 3-year-old boy was full of energy that morning. Witnesses later recalled how excited he had been, tugging at his mother's hand as they approached Gorilla World. "I want to go in," he reportedly said, staring at the massive silverback with wide-eyed fascination. His mother, juggling several children, smiled and reminded him to stay close. She later told reporters she only looked away for a few seconds, but for a curious toddler, that was all it took. In that brief moment, the boy crawled under the steel railing, squeezed through thick bushes, and climbed over the concrete ledge. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he disappeared from view. Then came the sound of a splash. The child had fallen 15 feet into the moat, landing hard in the shallow water below. Visitors screamed. Parents pulled their children back from the railing. The boy sat crying, soaked, but miraculously uninjured from the fall. His mother rushed to the edge, screaming down to him, "Mommy's right here! Don't be scared!" Witnesses described her as frantic, sobbing, calling his name repeatedly. One visitor recalled hearing the boy reply softly, "I love you, Mommy." The chaos around the enclosure escalated quickly. Some people yelled for someone to jump in after the child, while others shouted angrily at the mother. One woman, tears streaming down her face, kept screaming, "Do something! Please, do something!" But no one could reach the boy without risking their own life. The only one close enough was Harambe. From the far side of the enclosure, the massive silverback turned his head toward the noise. Slowly, he began to move closer, his huge arms swaying as he approached the moat. To the boy's mother, the sight must have been terrifying. A 450-pound gorilla moving toward her helpless son. Yet to some in the crowd, Harambe's approach looked almost cautious, even protective. What happened next, and how people interpreted Harambe's behavior, would spark one of the most emotional debates in modern zoo history. 12:04 p.m. The climb witnesses gasped as the boy wriggled under the steel railing. His mother screamed his name, but it was too late. He slipped through the bushes and over the ledge. A sickening splash followed as he hit the shallow moat below. The boy sat crying, soaked, and stunned. Above, his mother yelled frantically, "Mommy's right here! Stay calm, baby!" The crowd pressed forward, phones recording, voices trembling with panic. 12:05 p.m. Harambe notices the boy. Harambe turned his massive head toward the commotion. From across the enclosure, he moved deliberately, his knuckles pressing into the dirt as his huge body swayed forward. The 2 female gorillas in the exhibit stayed back, alarmed by the noise. Harambe, however, approached the moat with slow, measured steps. Some visitors shouted warnings. "Get him out of there! Shoot the gorilla!" Others whispered, almost in awe, "He's not hurting him. He's just looking." 12:06 p.m. First contact. Reaching the boy, Harambe crouched low, tilting his head as if studying him. Carefully, almost gently, Harambe extended his long arm, touching the boy's back. The child didn't scream. He sat still, watching the gorilla curiously. One witness later said, "It looked like Harambe was trying to comfort him." But the tension in the crowd grew unbearable. The shouting above agitated Harambe, his calm posture slowly shifting into something more alert, more defensive. 12:07 p.m. The dragging. Suddenly, Harambe grabbed the boy by his leg and pulled him swiftly through the water. Gasps and screams erupted. The boy was dragged like a doll, though experts later explained that gorillas sometimes drag their young to move them quickly to safety. But to the untrained eye, Harambe's raw strength looked terrifying. One wrong movement, even accidental, could crush a child instantly. 12:08 p.m. The standoff. Harambe stopped in a corner of the moat, standing protectively over the boy. His posture was tense, chest raised, muscles tight. as he looked up at the panicked crowd. Primate specialists later debated his intentions. Was this defensive body language shielding the boy from perceived threats above? Or was Harambe growing agitated, unsure how to react to the chaos? 12:09 p.m. The decision. The zoo's dangerous animal response team was already in position. They had seconds to choose. Risk waiting for a tranquilizer to work, or act immediately. A dart could take 5 to 10 minutes to sedate a 450-pound gorilla, and worse, could enrage him. One sudden reaction could kill the boy in seconds. 12:10 p.m. The shot. A single loud crack echoed through gorilla world. Harambe collapsed instantly, lifeless in the water. The crowd went silent. A few sobbed. Others whispered in shock. And within moments, zookeepers rushed in, pulling the boy to safety. What lasted just 6 minutes would ignite a worldwide debate that continues to this day. For the Cincinnati Zoo's dangerous animal response team, those 6 minutes were the most difficult of their careers. The team is specially trained for life or death situations, prepared to act quickly if an animal threatens a human life. But they are also animal caretakers, people who love and protect the creatures they work with every day. When the emergency call came in, child in the gorilla enclosure, code red at Gorilla World. The team raced to position. From their vantage point, they could see Harambe standing over the boy, his massive body tensed as the crowd screamed above. Every second mattered. The team's leader later explained the impossible choice they faced. A tranquilizer wasn't an option. It takes several minutes to work, and during that time the animal can react unpredictably. If Harambe had been startled or even stumbled while holding the boy, it could have been fatal. Even a single gorilla strike, intentional or not, could kill a human instantly. And Harambe, at 450 pounds, had the strength to crush a coconut with one hand. Yet pulling the trigger wasn't easy. Many on the team knew Harambe personally. They had worked with him daily, fed him, cleaned his habitat, and watched him grow. Some had even celebrated his transfer to Cincinnati 2 years earlier, proud to be part of a program to save his endangered species. One keeper later admitted in tears, "It felt like killing a family member, but we had no choice. It was him or the boy." When the shot rang out, several staff members turned away. One longtime keeper reportedly left the scene in tears, unable to watch as Harambe collapsed. After the boy was carried to safety, the team stood in silence. They had saved a child's life, but at a devastating cost. In the hours that followed, the zoo staff worked quietly, some crying as Harambe's body was covered and removed. For them, this wasn't just an incident. It was the heartbreaking loss of a gorilla they had loved and cared for every day. And while they mourned privately, outside the gates, the world's anger was just beginning to grow. As Harambe's body was lifted from the moat, silence hung heavy over Gorilla World. The once cheering crowd now stood in stunned disbelief. Parents clutched their children, some crying, others whispering angrily about what they had just witnessed. Zoo staff rushed into the enclosure. 2 keepers gently lifted the boy from the shallow water. He was crying but alive, trembling, soaked, and covered in mud. The boy's mother reached for him from above, sobbing as she repeated over and over, "You're okay, baby. Mommy's here. You're okay." Witnesses later recalled her whispering through tears, "Thank you for saving my baby." Paramedics quickly transported the child to Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Doctors confirmed he had only minor scrapes and bruises. There were no broken bones, no serious injuries, an almost miraculous outcome considering the fall and Harambe's size. But for the zoo staff, there was no relief, only grief. Some keepers were seen with tears streaming down their faces. Others quietly consoled one another as Harambe's body was covered with a sheet and taken away. Within hours, zoo officials held a press conference. Thane Maynard, the Cincinnati Zoo's director, spoke solemnly. This was a life or death situation. The child's life was in imminent danger. Tranquilizers were not an option. They take time to work and could have agitated Harambe. We stand by our decision. His statement did little to calm the public. By evening, news outlets across the country were running the story non-stop. Some early witnesses defended the zoo's decision, saying they had been terrified for the boy's life. But others were outraged, calling Harambe's death unnecessary. Even as zoo staff grieved privately, anger began to grow outside the gates. Protesters started arriving within hours, holding signs that read, "Who failed Harambe?" and "His blood is on your hands." And by nightfall, Harambe's name was already trending online. Thousands of people, many who had never heard of him before that morning, were demanding answers. And his death was quickly becoming the most controversial animal incident the world had ever seen. By the end of that day, Harambe's death had spread far beyond Cincinnati. What began as a local zoo tragedy turned into a global firestorm within hours. News headlines screamed, "Gorilla shot dead to save child," "Tragedy at Cincinnati Zoo," and outrage over Harambe's death. Television broadcasts replayed the shaky cell phone footage on a loop. Harambe dragging the boy through the water, followed by the deafening crack of the rifle shot. Public outcry begins. Outside the zoo, people began leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten notes at the Gorilla World exhibit. Signs read, "R.I.P. Harambe," and "We're sorry." Protests erupted. Animal rights activists held vigils, chanting, "Justice for Harambe." Some accused the zoo of acting too quickly, insisting that tranquilizers should have been used. Online, petitions demanding accountability spread rapidly. One petition, "Justice for Harambe," gained over 500,000 signatures within days, calling for an investigation into the zoo's safety protocols. But the harshest criticism fell on the boy's parents. Social media users accused them of negligence, saying Harambe had died because they weren't watching their child. Angry messages flooded the mother's Facebook page, some even threatening her life. One woman commented publicly, "That gorilla was murdered because you couldn't control your kid." The mother speaks out. Under intense scrutiny, the boy's mother released a statement a few days later. "We are thankful to the Cincinnati Zoo for saving our son's life. We know this was a tragedy, but we ask the public not to judge us. Accidents happen in seconds." Her words did little to calm the outrage. While some defended her, saying any parent can lose track of a child for a moment, others refused to forgive. The internet explodes. Harambe's death quickly took on a life of its own online. On Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, the hashtag #JusticeForHarambe went viral. Millions shared photos and videos of the silverback, many expressing genuine grief. But as the days passed, a strange shift occurred. Memes flooded the internet, turning Harambe into an unlikely pop culture icon. Edited images of him appeared everywhere, from angel wings and halos to bizarre, humorous tributes. For some, this was deeply disrespectful. For others, it was a way to cope with the tragedy. The mix of genuine mourning and viral humor only made Harambe's story more famous. Within a week, his name had become a symbol, not just of sadness, but of the strange way the internet reacts to tragedy. A divided world. People were split into two camps. Those who believed the zoo made the only possible choice, and those who saw Harambe as an innocent victim of human negligence. One thing was certain. Harambe was no longer just a gorilla. He was now a global conversation about ethics, captivity, and the value of animal life. In the days following Harambe's death, the mother at the center of the controversy found herself at the heart of a storm she never expected. While her son was recovering at home, safe and uninjured, the world was tearing her apart. She received thousands of hateful messages online. Some called her careless. Others accused her outright of murdering Harambe. A few went so far as to send death threats, forcing her and her family to avoid public appearances altogether. Witnesses who had been at the zoo that day defended her, insisting she had been attentive and panicked, as any mother would be. But on social media, sympathy was rare. Her statement to the public. 4 days after the incident, she released an emotional statement. "I want to express my gratitude to the Cincinnati Zoo for saving my son's life. We know this was a tragedy for everyone involved, but my son is safe because they acted quickly. We ask the public not to judge us because accidents can happen in seconds." Her words were calm and respectful, but they did little to calm the outrage. Many believed she had been negligent, but others began to speak up in her defense. Parents around the world admitted that even the most careful mothers and fathers can lose sight of a child for a moment. Witness accounts of that day. Several visitors also came forward to describe her behavior in those critical minutes. One woman said, "She was screaming and crying the whole time. She kept yelling, 'Mommy's right here, don't be scared.' She was desperate to save her child." Another witness recalled hearing the boy respond softly from the moat, "I love you, Mommy." Those words, repeated in news reports, painted a different picture, not of a careless parent, but of a terrified mother watching her worst nightmare unfold in front of hundreds of strangers. A parent's guilt. Though the mother rarely spoke publicly again, friends later told reporters she struggled deeply with guilt. She would never forget that Harambe died to save her son. And even as the world argued about whether the zoo made the right decision, she was left to carry a quiet, private burden, knowing that her family's trip to the zoo had ended in tragedy, and that the life of a beloved animal was lost because of one unguarded moment. Harambe's death didn't just dominate headlines for days. It sparked lasting changes in zoos and wildlife conservation discussions worldwide. In the weeks following the incident, the Cincinnati Zoo faced intense scrutiny. While officials stood by their decision, they acknowledged that the enclosure needed improvements. Within a month, Gorilla World's barriers were redesigned. The steel railing was raised higher, additional fencing was added, and thicker protective barriers were installed to ensure that no child could ever breach the exhibit again. Other zoos across the U.S. quietly followed suit, reassessing safety standards for enclosures built decades ago. Thane Maynard, the zoo's director, later said, "We loved Harambe. Losing him was devastating for our staff, but safety has to come first. We never want to face this situation again." A surge in conservation awareness. Ironically, Harambe's death also brought global attention to gorilla conservation. Donations to wildlife organizations surged in the weeks after the tragedy. Many people who had never thought much about gorillas before suddenly learned about the plight of the western lowland gorilla, a critically endangered species due to poaching and habitat destruction. Some conservation groups referred to this as the Harambe effect, a tragic reminder that sometimes it takes a heartbreaking incident to make people care. Life after Harambe at the zoo. In 2017, a new silverback gorilla named Mshindi was introduced to the Cincinnati troupe. While the zoo moved forward, for many visitors, Gorilla World felt forever changed. Guests began leaving flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes at the enclosure. Messages like, "We miss you, Harambe," and "You deserved better," became a common sight, even years after his death. A conversation bigger than one zoo. The incident also fueled broader ethical debates about the role of zoos in modern society. Some argued that no matter how safe or naturalistic enclosures appear, wild animals don't belong behind barriers for human entertainment. Others insisted that zoos are vital to conservation, especially for endangered species like Harambes, which might not survive in the wild without breeding programs. But regardless of where people stood, Harambe's story had done something remarkable. It made millions of people across the world stop and think about the lives of animals they had only ever seen from behind glass. Harambe's death became more than a zoo tragedy. It became a symbol, a reflection of how humans view and treat wild animals in captivity. Psychologists later described what they called the Harambe effect. It was the idea that one tragic incident could shift public perception almost overnight. People who had never given much thought to gorillas, or to zoos at all, were suddenly asking questions about animal rights, conservation, and the ethics of keeping intelligent creatures behind glass for entertainment. A symbol of something bigger. To some, Harambe represented innocence lost, a gentle animal killed because of human error. His face appeared on protest posters, conservation campaigns, and even petitions calling for stricter zoo regulations. For others, he was a reminder of the difficult moral balance zoos face every day, protecting endangered animals while keeping them close enough for people to learn from and care about them. Frans de Waal, a world-renowned primatologist, once commented, "Harambe's death forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Do we value human life so much more than animal life that this was the only choice? Or should we rethink why animals like him are in zoos in the first place?" A strange internet legacy. But Harambe's legacy wasn't just serious. In a bizarre twist, he became a viral pop culture icon. Memes flooded the internet, some respectful, others absurd. turning Harambe into a strange mix of tragedy and humor. While many conservationists felt this was disrespectful, others argued that the viral attention kept his name alive, ensuring more people learned about gorilla conservation than ever before. An enduring memory. Years later, visitors to the Cincinnati Zoo still leave flowers, notes, and stuffed animals at Gorilla World. Messages like "R.I.P. Harambe" and "You won't be forgotten" remain a quiet reminder that, for many, his death felt personal. Harambe was no longer just a gorilla. He had become a global conversation about the value of animal life, the ethics of captivity, and how a single moment can change the world's perception forever. And even now, his name still evokes a simple, heartbreaking truth. He didn't ask to be there, yet he paid the ultimate price. Harambe's story leaves us with more than just grief. It leaves us with questions we still struggle to answer. Did the Cincinnati Zoo make the right decision? Most experts agree they had no choice. A child's life was at risk, and tranquilizers were too dangerous in those critical seconds. But others argue that Harambe wasn't attacking. He might have been trying to protect the boy. Video footage shows moments where Harambe crouched low, gently touching the child, almost as if shielding him from the chaos above. But it also shows him dragging the boy through the water. A natural gorilla behavior, yes, but terrifying when it involves a fragile human child. This tragedy forces us to confront a deeper, more uncomfortable question. Should animals like Harambe be in zoos at all? On one side, zoos save endangered species, educate the public, and inspire people to care about wildlife. Harambe himself was part of a breeding program meant to protect his critically endangered species. Without zoos, Western lowland gorillas might disappear entirely. But on the other side, captivity takes a toll. No enclosure, no matter how naturalistic, can replicate the freedom of the wild. And when humans and wild animals are kept so close together, accidents and tragedies will always be possible. For many, Harambe has become a symbol of this moral dilemma. His death forces us to weigh a human child's life against an animal's right to live freely. Most people agree the boy's life had to come first. But was this the inevitable cost of a system built to display animals for our entertainment? There are no easy answers. Perhaps Harambe's greatest legacy is that he made us ask these questions. Questions we can't ignore anymore. Because Harambe wasn't just a gorilla in a zoo. He was a living, breathing creature, capable of emotion, intelligence, and maybe even compassion for a small child who wandered into his world. And in the end, his life reminds us of something we often forget. When we choose to keep wild animals in captivity, we also choose to bear the moral weight of what happens when our worlds collide. Harambe's story is more than a tragedy. It's a reminder of how fragile the balance is between humans and wild animals. Do you believe the zoo made the right decision that day? Or do you think Harambe should have been given a chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what you think about this heartbreaking moral dilemma. If Harambe's story moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more true animal stories, and share it so his legacy and the questions it raises are never forgotten. This is Harambe's final story.